Oh, okay. Right. Welcome everyone to our second session of the day already. Hope you guys are still excited as how we first started the day. And for this session, this today's sessions are brought to you by Pennsylvania Area Health Education Center, whose mission is to improve health and wellness by providing educational programs to enhance community health and lead medical prep, the #1 destination for finding the best USMLE and medical school exam tutors. So for our session today, Dr. Gregory Polites is the Dr. Gregory Polites is the executive vice dean of the Carle Illinois College of Medicine at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. He joined Carle after a distinguished 20-year career at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, where he achieved the rank of professor of emergency medicine. While at WashU, Dr. Polites held several leadership positions while serving as the chair of the Central Subcommittee on Medical School Admissions. Today, he will be speaking about tips and strategies while we are writing a compelling personal statement. Please let us welcome Dr. Polites.
Great. Thank you, Michael. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen here. And let's see here. Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Volume all right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so let me go ahead and get started. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm very excited about talking with you, and I hope there's lots of questions. Before I start, I just want to go over that I have no financial interests or conflicts of interest to disclose. And then I also want to mention that the advice that I give here is based solely on my experience as a member of admissions, the admissions committee for 18 years and chair of the regional subcommittee for the past 8 years. All this was at Washington University. I took this new position here in April. So up until that point, I was overseeing the regional subcommittee for the central region of the United States for acceptance to medical school at WashU. So hopefully you'll trust the information that I give you. This is based on a lot of lots and lots of time spent in this area. But even with that being said, this advice is my own. It's not meant to reflect the advice or opinions of any institution, whether it's Washington University or Carle Illinois College of Medicine or the AAMC. So the objectives of this talk is really to discuss the purpose of the personal statement and also the different types that are commonly submitted. I'm going to go over the things that we usually see. Most personal statements fall into a couple formats, main formats, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those. And then I'm going to highlight what really makes a personal statement stand out in one's application, and then discuss potential pitfalls when writing one's personal statement. I do have to say that, for some reason, the personal statement tends to be an area that there's a lot of angst about. I think part of it is, students want to put their best foot forward, but they're unsure of what to write, and they have quite a bit of anxiety about this. So hopefully I will demystify this area of your application and make you realize that it's nothing to really be too worried about. Some of the details just to kind of know is, so really all this information can be found on the AAMC website. If you go to the AAMC, just Google AAMC and MCAS, it will take you to the document that you'll use when it comes time for you to actually apply using the admission service, the American Medical College Admission Service, MCAS. And it really provides everything that you really want to know. So I don't have any specific links, but you will refer to that document very frequently. The limit to your application, to your essay, is 5,300 characters. So it's a fair amount, but not too large compared to when you eventually apply for residency. When you go through what's called the ERAS system, Electronic Residency Application Service for residency, that limit is 28,000 characters. So this is relatively, quite a bit less than that. If you are an MD, PhD applicant, though, you're going to have 2 more essays to write. And that can be a little bit challenging for some because you want to write about something a little bit different. There's the MD PhD essay, talking about why do you want to become an MD PhD. It's kind of similar to the MD essay, but now you want to put in why you want to become a physician scientist, and you want to talk more about that. And that limit is 3,000 characters. And then there's a significant research experience essay, which has a limit of 10,000 characters. So it is quite a bit of writing, but if you approach this the right way, it's not too daunting. Some other details to know about: it's advised to type your essay directly into the MCAS application instead of cutting and pasting. And the reason is because medical schools receive all the essays as plain text. So even though you might be putting bold and italics and underlines and bullets and all that in your draft, if you decide to do that and do a cut and paste, it's not going to be seen on the actual MCAS application. So you want to make sure that you just do plain text. And what I really recommend is that you go ahead and draft your text on a plain document, and then go ahead and do a spell check, because there's no spell checker in the MCAS application. And just instead of using indentations, separate your paragraphs by a full line. So do it like block format. That's how med schools will see it. If you try to do an indentation as a new paragraph, it won't indent, and it'll all be one large compressed block of text. So if you separate your paragraphs by a full line, that will separate your thoughts. Again, there's no spell checker in the MCAS application, so you want to be really, really careful. And then if you do want to do a cut and paste, you want to make sure that you do it in plain text. Microsoft Notepad or Mac Text Edit will allow you to do that. But again, don't put any formatting changes in there, italics or any of that, because it may look different on the actual application. We kind of understood that sometimes that happens to students and they don't know that. I don't think most schools are going to penalize you, but what can happen is what you think is a comma, it can turn out to be something else, or what you think is an indentation is another character that's inserted. So try to avoid that. And then when it comes to ChatGPT, this is kind of a big topic now, and I would really want to caution you about formatting any part of your personal statement in ChatGPT. And the reason is, to be honest with you, when I look at a ChatGPT document, I can kind of get a vibe on whether or not this is truly a voice of a student, because I've read thousands of these over almost 20 years, or whether this is crafted based on something like that. Where I think it's ethical to use ChatGPT is if you want to put in a prompt that tells you, that you want to figure out some ways in which some categories you could write about, or some ideas, that I think is okay. But I would not do anything where you have ChatGPT write any of your essay and then modify that essay and put it back in. I wouldn't do it that way. I would do it more as kind of getting some ideas that you might want to talk about. I think that's okay. So just take extra caution in that, because if the WMC thinks that you are, I should say MCAS thinks that you have plagiarized, they'll actually do an investigation into that, and so you don't even want to take a chance on that. So I would be very, very careful about using ChatGPT. So really, what's the purpose of the personal statement? It's really to give schools a glimpse of the person behind the application. It gives the applicant a chance to highlight what's important and unique about them. And for most applicants, and this is where this is going to come as a little shocker to some people, but for most applicants, the personal statement has a relatively neutral effect, neutral overall effect on your application. And I say that because it's really expected that you write it well, and most applicants do. For the most part, everyone who's applying to med school really, they've done well in all their courses, including composition courses. And so it's when you see personal statements that are written really, really well, it's kind of hard in some ways to kind of stand out a whole lot. So you may ask, well, why even worry about this, and why should I do it? Well, the thing is for some people that it could provide that little extra that makes a school want to take a deeper look. And especially if you write a poor personal statement, that can really hurt your application. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I don't see a whole lot of poor personal statements, but every now and then you do. And when you do, it does really have a negative overall kind of look to the application when it's really written poorly. But if you do take the time to write it well, you could stand out in some ways. So the purpose of this is to give the schools a chance for you to see, how did you come to this decision? And that's kind of the common theme of all personal statements. While you go through the personal statement, you can showcase unique aspects of your background and personality that you feel will make you a good fit for medicine, and even a good fit for a particular school. And I say this because, if you are writing, if you're allowed to write, you write a personal statement for a particular school, because you can write school-specific essays. Number one, you want to make sure that you are assigning it to the right school, which I think most people will. But then you want to review the personal statement again to make sure that if you mention the school in that personal statement, that it's actually the school that you're applying to. So I read a personal statement one time where the student told me how, when I was at Washington University, how much he really wanted to go to Yale for medical school. And that was meant to be a WashU essay, but he forgot to go back in the body of the text and change the school. So be very careful about that. But because you can individualize the school, you might be able to showcase a unique aspect about you and your background that may be a particular fit for that school. I don't think most people do that. It's a very time-consuming thing to do. Most people will draft a personal statement that fits for all schools, but that's something you should know about. Just be careful if you personalize it. Ultimately, no matter which, and we're going to go through some types of personal statements, ultimately you want to use it in a way that answers the question about how did I get to this point of wanting to be a physician. So no matter where you start, you want to end up with that description of why medicine, why did I choose this route. So the common types of personal statements that we see are, one is my journey. That's a very common one that the student talks about. How did they get to this point? And some personal statements can actually use a variety of these different types. The My Journey essay is probably among the most common. The one thing that you want to be careful about that is you don't want to rehash your entire resume in your personal statement. Some people feel the need to do that because they think that it's going to be missed somewhere else, but it's not. Your entire file is going to be reviewed either before your interview or at some point after your interview, and just depending on how schools do it. But if you try to put everything in to your personal statement that's in your CV, it's not going to flow well. It's going to be very kind of disjointed, and it's really going to appear as if you're just trying to get that information out a second time. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't talk about different parts of your background, and I think that's okay. If you want to talk about how a particular course led to your interest in medicine, that then led to your research, and how that research really piqued your interest in medicine or a particular area of medicine, that's fine. You just don't want to try to do verbatim every step along your personal statement. Another real common type is a personal experience. So we see a lot of personal statements where the patient will say the impetus to become a physician really came through their own personal experience as a patient. And they may tell the story about them being injured in a car accident or suffering some ailment. You do have to realize, if you mention something that's private in your personal statement, say, for example, you talk about your battle with depression, then that actually will become fair game to be asked about during your interview. If it's not, then interviewers cannot ask you any kind of personal questions. They can't ask you if they see that you took a leave of absence. They can't say, what did you take that medical leave of absence? What did you take that medical leave for? They can't do that. If you they can't ask you about things such as politics, political affiliation, sexual orientation. They're not going to ask you, questions about your religion, your faith, any of that. But if you bring up something in your personal statement and you talk about that, then that does become kind of fair game for them to talk to you more about it. Another common type is a applicant's personal experience as a caregiver, either taking care of somebody in terms of a volunteer experience or even a family member. So we see that quite often. Someone had a father or a grandfather who was dying of an illness, and the impact that had on that person, or a sick member or friend. Those are very common personal statements that we see. Love for science, love for service. Those are all also areas that you can talk about what it is that you absolutely love about science and how you want to apply that to people. I would recommend that if you do write about us, you make it kind of a science-based personal statement. You want to tie in why medicine, though, because you want to differentiate yourself from somebody who wants to get, say, a PhD solely. If you want to become a medical scientist, a physician scientist, and that's fine, you can talk about both. But even if you're going just for the MD, you want to make sure that you mention about why it is that you love science, but how you want to apply that to individuals. That's really important. The triumph over tragedy is another common personal statement where someone talks about something they've overcome. This is actually a good place if you struggle in courses in college, you didn't have a good start to college, or you had a leave of absence for some reason. Remember, anything that you share is up to you. Regarding things such as leaves of absence or any kind of other struggles. But if you do have something in your background that you really, want to talk about, the personal statement is really a good place to put it in there, because it may not be somewhere that you have elsewhere in your application. Now, schools will send you secondary applications, and they oftentimes have questions where you may be able to put that information there too. But if you really want it to be part of your main application, to kind of explain how you progressed and improved over the course of your time in college, you may want to put that in there at that time too. And then there's oftentimes the analogy personal statement. I've seen applicants who start talking about their sport, their favorite sport, or what they played in college, and then they draw analogies to how medicine is very similar in terms of teamwork and those kind of things. That's not as common of one. Probably my journey, my personal experience are the most common personal statements. So general advice is know your audience. And what I mean by that is, medical schools are going to be reading this. So you don't want to try to stand out too hard. Sometimes students will they'll just try to be too unique in their personal statement. Remember, you're having physicians that are reading this, and PhDs, and so you want to be a little cautious in terms of, keep it professional. Don't make it too kind of, too flippant, or because sometimes applicants will do that. Let it be a genuine reflection of who you are. You really want this to speak for your voice, because when an interviewer reviews your personal statement and then they meet you during the interview, they will see, is this the same person that I'm seeing on paper as in front of me? And if it's really discordant, that kind of raises some eyebrows. You want to put in the time to do it right. I would say give a day or two and reread it and see if it still sounds well. But at some point you have to let it go. And I've seen some students that delay their application because they just can't stop doing revisions. Like I said, do the best you can, write it well, and you're going to be fine. One thing too is I would avoid too much of the first person. Some reviewers don't like to hear the applicant saying, I did this, and I accomplished this, I did this. And instead, it's probably better to talk about what you learned from an experience or some activity, instead of just saying I throughout the personal statement. You want to double check, triple check for spelling errors, the school's name, all of that, because that can really be something that can hurt your application, is if you have a lot of spelling errors. And then I recommend, this is my personal recommendation, is having 3 people review it. Somebody who knows you well, like a parent, does this sound like you? Somebody for grammatical correctness. So some schools have writing centers where you can actually have a PhD student in English that reviews the paper, that makes sure that you're writing it well. And then someone for substance and content, like a mentor. Some advisors will review personal statements, but a lot of pre-health advisors won't, because there's so many students and they want it to be in your voice. But I think that will help you with that. And again, try to avoid trying too hard to stand out in terms of, stand on the strength of your application. Let this be an addition to your application, not trying to highlight what's already in your application. And again, do not copy and paste from ChatGPT. I would not let that be. I would really kind of stay away from that. I would be careful with that. Unacceptable things are spelling errors and poor grammar, a poorly organized, scattered, or unclear personal statement. You got to be careful. You want to do it right. And that's it. So I will now leave time, 25 minutes, I think, for questions. And let me go ahead here. Okay, so one question is, I've usually used ChatGPT for something like rewrite the sentence or how to say this more scientifically, formally. Do you think I should not do that at all? I think you just got to be kind of careful. I mean, when you, because that's a slippery slope. You can start having ChatGPT actually formulate all your questions or all your statements, and by the time you write it, it really wasn't what you wanted to say. I think where it's probably more applicable is to maybe say, what are some ideas for things that I could write about my background when applying to med school? And then it gives you a list, and you can go, okay, you know what? This list, I've done each of these. I didn't even think about thinking this. That's where I think it's the best way to use it, where you're still using your voice, but you're not actually having it craft your sentence for you. Another one says, while drafting my personal statement, I realized I don't have an aha moment to write about. And instead, I want to piece together all the aspects of my life that have snowballed into my passion for medicine. I want to do this chronologically, but don't want it to sound too scattered or choppy. Do you have any suggestions? Yeah, that's a great question, by the way. And I think what you just need to do is you need to spend time with it. This is something that when you try to do it in one sitting, it's just overwhelming, because you have so much you want to say and you just can't say it all. So that's where I think in a situation like this is where you need to give yourself a little bit of space, a little bit of time. Like you might want to go ahead and think, okay, in this one area, this one period of my education or my life, what's like the fundamental thing I want to say, and try to limit it to so many sentences, and then just think about that, and then start piecing it together, and then afterwards start seeing if it flows naturally, because but to try to do it all at once, that can be tough. But if you take the time, you will find that it's going to sound good at the end. It really will. When you think it's going to sound choppy or scattered, when I see personal statements that are choppy and scattered, it's when there's such a jump to another idea or topic within the personal statement. There wasn't kind of a clear flowing, transition. And so you can think about transition statements that can help with that. After I completed my bachelor's degree, I then went on to, and just kind of with those flowing statements, I think that will help quite a bit.
Great. Okay.
Yes.
No. I just I can take the question for now.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Yeah. That'll be more convenient, I guess.
Yeah,
so there will be another there is another question. Michael is asking that what was the most impactful personal statement you read, and what differentiated it from the others that you've read?
Mm-hmm. That's tough. That's I'm an emergency physician, and I get the question all the time, what was your most interesting case? And honestly, it's really hard for me to do that, because I've been doing this for 24 years. That's really hard to say. I think I've seen a lot of terrific personal statements just because it flowed well, but it was sincere. The ones that really stand out are ones in which you really feel this genuine feeling that the person has chosen the right field, medicine's the right thing for them. They have done everything that is really consistent with what they're saying. And I feel like I kind of know the person after I've read their personal statement. So I think that's what I would say really resonates. There hasn't been a particular story or something like that that stood out that I necessarily remember. And I've seen an entire range. I mean, I've seen from, students who have lost their best friend to losing their parents. I've even seen personal statements of an applicant who lost their family member and witnessed it, in an accident. I think the thing is, if you're thinking maybe on the other end that the person reading it is getting emotional from, it's probably not the case because we read so many of those. I think I just try to sense, does this seem like someone who kind of understands kind of the big picture, and they let me know what parts of their background really kind of seem like a great fit, a great fit for this person. So okay, next.
Yeah. The next question is that, like, what are some topics? I know that we covered a lot of, like, what are common topics that we write about when we're writing a personal statement, but, like,
Yeah.
what are some topics that you think that we should avoid potentially when we're writing our PSs?
I would avoid anything political. I wouldn't get into politics. You may have a very strong opinion about something and have really strong feelings, but and this is just general advice that I'm giving for everybody, is it's like when I give advice about the application picture. I think everybody should dress really nice in their application picture. I will see, some applicants that wear a t-shirt in their application picture. I had one applicant who didn't wear a shirt in their application picture, and the thing is, it just raises unnecessary questions. You won't get bonus points for not wearing a shirt, but you can definitely have some, depending on who's reviewing your application, that just says this application is not moving forward. And because every school does it differently. You may have one person who's screening your application, you may have two, but you don't know what their background is like. I joke about the fact that you could have a retired surgeon who believes that everyone should wear a tie going to bed at night. You don't know. So it's better to be. I like to give conservative advice, and I don't mean political conservatism. I'm saying advice that works across the board. So, while you may say, well, I might connect with someone if I talk about this really kind of controversial topic. Well, it may work, but you could end up having your application reviewed by somebody who's just like, not appropriate. I think, I would hope that most people who are on admissions committees set aside their personal views on issues. If I had somebody that was speaking about something, even in an interview, that's not my value set, it's not gonna make a difference for me. I think because we want diverse students of all types and thoughts and all this, and who am I to say mine is right? So, and I think most people who serve on admissions committees are like that. They're very open-minded and all that, but I just think you got to be kind of careful about the topics you choose. I don't think that's a time to take a political stand. It's not a time to talk about something real controversial, just because you just don't know. So good
Like,
question.
more so using your judgment to, like, stay.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing too is, it could be that the interviewer might agree with you on the thing that you write about, but may think in the back of their mind, this seems like an inappropriate topic to bring up in this venue. And what is the judgment of this person making that decision to do it here? So that's what I think. I don't care if a person is wearing a t-shirt in their application picture, but this is the most important application up until this point in your life. And so at what point would you dress nice for a picture? And so why take that chance? That's how I look at it.
That's definitely insightful.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next question is that, like, there's a person asking like they often felt that introduction is the trickiest aspect of like writing a personal statement.
Yeah.
And you have any general suggestions about like whether to
Um,
do it formally or just like do
well,
something like
it comes back to so if you're a creative writer, I mean, I've seen creative writing where someone starts out and it's like a creative story. It's just like wow, um, you can do that, but I don't think you need to do that. I don't think you need to necessarily write this like this is an excerpt in a magazine that's trying to grab the reader's attention. I mean, you hear that you want to grab the reader's attention, but for the most part, we're looking for substance and looking for a connection between one thought and the other. And I wouldn't try too hard um, to be too unique. And so that's why I think sometimes you can overdo it, and then you kind of come off as like it's like, well, this is a little odd. This is a little, Um, again, I've worked with a lot of students. I still do, all the way from the age of 18 all the way up to mid 30s. At every educational level. So I don't. There really isn't a personal statement that I would say that about, but I think others might. So I would just say start out. You can think about what your main theme is going to be. If you want to use the theme of your own personal experience as a patient, you can start out with that and say, as I was being rolled down the hall, for surgery, whatever, and then you can kind of start it out that way. But there's many different ways you can go about doing this.
right? And then there's another person asking about like, so he or she is trying to like write a personal statement that's like more so fitting in the category of like trauma over tragedy. But
Yeah,
they're wondering like how do you kind of sort of find a balance between sharing a story and trauma dumping?
that's a great question. Yes. It's I think that if you're talking about what you've learned from an experience, and how it made you a stronger person, how it built resiliency in you, and how it motivated you to pursue medicine, I don't think it's going to come off as trauma dumping. Now, the thing you got to be careful in terms of your overall application, though, is say, for example, you wanted to talk about your battle with anxiety or your battle with depression. Very common, nothing to feel, to feel embarrassed about. It may not, if you don't describe it well, maybe it's not the best place to put that in, but I've seen that. And if it's well written, that's great. But say you do that, but then you don't want that to be like the theme of your entire application. And I have seen that before, where the theme is some trauma or tragedy, and everywhere in it, it's just nothing but that, and I think you got to be a little careful there. I think that, you don't because you're more than what your tragedy was. You're more than that. There's more aspects of your life than just that. And that's not to minimize it. It's just saying that I think you have to have a proper kind of, a proper degree of concentration on that. But I think if you do a triumph over tragedy story, showing how in the end you persevered, because that's really what medicine's about. Because everyone in med school is going to struggle. You're all going to have days that you're going to be like, why am I doing this? Now some physicians will tell you that's not the truth. I trust me, it's the truth. You're going to have times when you are exhausted, times when you're in your residency and you're like, oh my God, why am I? And you'll come out of it, and it's important to be able to understand that. And that's part of what I've done in my career is working with students to teach them this is going to come. And you want to know about resiliency and something called anti-fragility, and so it's and that's not a real popular term, but it's basically saying that acute stressors can actually make you stronger if you know how to approach it well. It doesn't mean that you're a fragile human being. It just means that you're it means you take acute stressors and you can become stronger from them. And so a tragedy to triumph story, I think, can be used like that in an essay.
Great. So our next question will be like, since clinical experience is such an important aspect of medicine in that application, and they were wondering basically like when someone is writing up the personal statement, should they include like at least one clinical experience?
I think clinical experience, I think that is, it's a very common thing we see in personal statements because it does kind of demonstrate what activities kind of got you excited and interested about medicine. So usually there is some clinical aspect that's woven into the story. If it's a personal experience about yourself, it could be as you as a patient and what you learned by, seeing the compassionate physician. If she took care of you in a compassionate way, you're going to remember that. And I see that quite often. So I do think weaving in a clinical context is a wise thing to do and very common.
Great. Hey, next question is that like when you said that avoid using the first person too much, could you like a little bit elaborate it on like a little bit more?
Yeah. So if you write, so the thing is while you're writing about your background, you don't want to make it seem as if you are just using that 5,300 words to just boast about yourself. And this was actually from a mentor of mine who was a former dean of admissions, who told me that he said one time, he goes, I just have always found it annoying when I read a personal statement where the person is talking just, I did this, and then I got this, and then I won this award. And then I was, I don't think you need to do that. You can talk about your experiences and how they impacted you and how you learn from them. And you can say the same thing, but it's not directed just it's about what you've learned, but it's not so much I, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, I'm sure. Yeah, definitely. I
Mm-hmm.
guess like that's common in just like common writing as well.
Yeah. And you don't need to boast about your compassion, and I am compassionate and I mean, your activities will demonstrate that. I think that you can talk about yourself, but you also want to be somewhat humble. One of the things I've always found, I could do a whole hour on just the interview. I mean, one thing that's really impressive is when you learn something about an applicant from another part of the application, but it didn't come from the applicant themselves. Something that's really impressive. They will know about it. So you don't necessarily need to talk about it necessarily, unless it comes up naturally in the question or conversation. So.
Okay. So the next question is that like, so this person actually is not like asking about like personal statements specifically, but more so on like admission process. So they have like a C- in med school prerequisite, and otherwise all A's and few B's. Is it absolutely imperative that this person retake it?
So you're going to get, that's a good question. So some schools, if you received a C- and it was an area of your major, you have to retake it. So you want to check with the policies of your department. If it was within, say you're a bio major and you got a C- in a bio course, they may want better than a C- for that. So that's one. I've heard there's different views on this. Some will say go ahead and retake the class to show that you finally kind of understood it and got it. Others will say don't do that, but take another course at a higher level and do well in it. So in the same discipline. So you got a C- in chemistry, take another chemistry course and demonstrate, what, I can do chemistry. And the reason is because on the MCAS application, you have to average. Well, you basically, it will come out in the wash. It'll come out as an average. If you had an A, which is a 4.0, and a C, which is a 2.0, it's going to average out to a B. You don't do it like that, but you have to put every course that you've taken down. And if your school replaces your first one with an R and recalculates your GPA for MCAS, it doesn't work that way. Your GPA was going to be a little bit lower. It will make you count that 2.0. And so the difference in your GPA is if you got an A in a higher level course or an A by retaking, it will be the same, but it depends on, some believe that it's better to take a course at a higher level. And so what I would say on that, just a little bit more, is that if you really find that next level course is something you don't want to take, then if you want to retake it, I think that's okay. So it's either, I think you can go either direction on that. And I don't mean to be vague, but people have opinions on that. You'll talk to some. I've talked to different deans of admissions that say retake it, and others like, no, don't retake it. Just take another higher level course.
Great.
Oh, and I should say, if you didn't feel like you learned that information well enough to do well in a higher level course, then retake it. Yeah. So.
Yep. And there's an interesting question actually. There's a person asking like, what did you write about in your personal statement back then?
Oh my God, it's been so long ago. I think what I wrote about. So I started out pre-med and switched and went into business, and then I went back, and I think I wrote about that windy, path. My whole life, I think it's been windy because I did half of a radiology residency before I went to emergency medicine. I decided I wanted to do something that involved more diagnosis and patient contact. So I kind of wrote about how your path isn't always a straight line. I think that's kind of what I wrote about. Yeah.
Great. That is an interesting career path as well, like switching to business and then back.
Yeah.
Honestly,
No, I got into business. My father owned a company and I thought I'd go work for him. And once I started to do the business curriculum, I knew right away, I'm like, this isn't for me. I don't think so, and now looking back, I can't imagine doing anything but medicine. I can't even fathom what I would if I were a business person or something else. I just I like where I am, like what I do. Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of demand for you, like share a way that potentially people can reach out to you. I wonder if that's going to be your email.
Yeah, I think that's fine. The only tough thing is it'd be tough to respond by email because sometimes students will send like 10 questions and to type a 10 question answer is tough. But if they want to reach out, I mean, depending on my schedule, my time, I'm happy to, if it's a quick question or they have some other question, I can maybe set up a Zoom meeting or something like that. My email is gpolites@illinois.edu.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
And one final thing I do want to say to everybody is, I understand how stressful this period of your life is. You've been working so hard. I think there's more stressors on you today than there were during my time. You just have more information you're being bombarded with. And the way social media is, you feel that everybody has a life that is so much more exciting and all that than yours. And it's not true. But I want everyone to know that medicine truly, I cannot imagine anything being more fulfilling and rewarding. It truly is just an incredible, there's a lot of work that goes into it and a lot of sacrifices, but I really can't see anything that would be more rewarding. And I think that you're all making a good decision. You're going to realize that each successive step is more fun than the previous. So when you get into medical school, you're really going to enjoy it. It's going to be a lot of work, but you're going to enjoy it. And then when you become a resident, you're going to enjoy that even more. You'll be working even harder, but you're going to enjoy it more. And so just stay the course. Don't think too much. Just realize you're bright, keep it up, keep towards what you're passionate about and don't give up. I wish everyone the best. Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Very, very, it was a pleasure talking with all of you. All right.